Kicking off the MS Swaminathan centenary commemorations, Prime Minister Narendra Modi vowed to protect the interests of the Indian farmer, fishing and dairying communities, whatever the risks or costs and whatever price he might have to pay for it personally. The question is, what is the price he and the country may have to pay? People of India value their sovereignty over any personal comfort or worldly needs. They will stoically absorb any damage, even short term loss of jobs, for national self esteem. Think of shrimp farmers, basmati and spices growers, carpet weavers, hosiery workers, and artisans, mostly in Gujarat, cutting diamonds, gems, and fitting them into gold jewelry, all hit by 50% tariffs. One more category, probably as numerous as all of the above, will also be hit. That is the Indian farmer. India exports loads of basmati rice, spices, fruits, and vegetables, packaged foods, tea, and coffee to the US, adding up to more than $6 billion. These are not going to survive a 50% tariff. Our immediate neighbors will benefit because they produce the same goods as well, the same agricultural goods as well. All of these, among our most vulnerable and marginal economic communities, will be paying the price for Trump's madness unless there is a reversal or there is a correction over the next few weeks. What will then be the personal risk to the Prime Minister? He probably means the pressure the US brings upon his government may destabilize it, or if economic distress rises as a result, it will help the opposition build protests and make his life difficult. He's telegraphing to us in code the return of the evil foreign hand. That he's one of our most politically and electorally astute leaders ever, we can have little argument with. So you have to pay serious attention to what he's saying. It is just that standing up to America is usually not a personal risk for a leader in India. Indira Gandhi did so with panache and benefited from it 1969 onward, 69 to 77 and then 80 to 84. Any suggestion of foreign pressure unites India behind their leader of the day, whoever the leader. To that extent, there is no personal risk to Prime Minister Modi. Since he's sounding so defiant and is in a risk-taking mood, however, we might point to a direction that will indeed entail political or even personal risk for him. If that works, and there is no reason why it should not work, it would revolutionize Indian farming. It will not only finally enable him, the Prime Minister, to double the farmer's income in the next 5 years. That's a promise he made some time back. It will also make them globally competitive, Indian farmers. So what is it that he needs to do to achieve that revolution? And what is the personal risk it might involve? That is why the setting in which he was speaking, he was giving this speech last Wednesday, becomes significant. MS Swaminathan, to whom this government awarded the Bharat Ratna, is widely acknowledged to be a parent of our Green Revolution and credited with ridding us of the national humiliation of living a ship-to-mouth existence. In the 1960s, Lyndon B. Johnson's administration simply had to delay the next ship to make India suffer and squirm. Among Johnson's asks was that India reduce its population growth drastically. That era ended with the Green Revolution and food grain self-sufficiency by 1971-72. It is important to note the methods of Swaminathan and his comrades. Besides the great American agronomist Norman Borlaug, who worked with all of them, they had drawn widespread criticism and suspicion from the usual suspects, the activists, those days mostly of the left, and the communist politicians. At the release of Swaminathan's biography, written by his niece Priyambada Jayakumar, key panelists noted that there was a widespread fear of the hybrids and the suspicion that any mechanization will only benefit the rich farmers. That's why the Swaminathan-led group of reformers set up the first field trials with small farmers. There is also the telling story of how difficult it was for Mrs. Gandhi's government to permit the import of just 18,000 tons of hybrid seeds for demonstration. This was in 1966, valued at rupees 5 crores. Everybody said, how can you do this? God knows what will happen with these seeds. Mrs. Gandhi held her nerve. There were risks if the new seeds brought in some destructive pestilence or if the experiment simply failed. Mrs. Gandhi was game and her reward was India getting freedom from hunger and humiliation forever. High risks equal high rewards. Wartime risks are an inevitability. If a war happens in times of any leader, the leader has to take those risks. However, the boldest leaders are those who choose risks in peacetime. That's why an impetus, a push is needed. In 1991, for Rao and Manmohan, it was the balance of payments crisis. From 1999 onwards, for Vajpayee, the post-Pokhran sanctions brought that gun to the head. In the past 2 decades, we haven't faced a crisis of such dimensions. That, combined with the still high, though decelerating, growth rates over the past 25 years, has bred complacency. It is characterized by that repeated boast of the fastest growing large economy in the world, the fourth largest, soon to be the third largest, etc., etc., etc. Better informed people, experts, have been talking of dozens of sorely needed reforms in manufacturing, infrastructure, terms of trade, tariff reduction, etc. Each one is challenging, particularly in our governance system. Manish Sabharwal probably understates it by using the term regulatory cholesterol. This system is actually worse. It is still atrophied. So we cannot underestimate these challenges. It is just that none of them is of a magnitude that entails personal risk to the Prime Minister. Just as the earlier crisis precipitated dramatic reforms in Indian industry, finance, competitiveness, and technology, why not use this opportunity to launch a new generation of farm reforms? Truth to tell, sad truth to tell, Indian farming has generally trudged along as if in the second gear since the Green Revolution. That isn't good enough for India. If we hadn't been so lazy and afraid, Trump's pressure on our agriculture would not have felt so severe. The last really bold agricultural reform in India was the Vajpayee government allowing GM, genetically modified, BT cotton seeds in 2002, ignoring massive resistance from its own Swadeshi base. He had already stretched the Jai Jawan, Jai Kisan slogan to Jai Vigyan after Pokhran 2. Now he said BT will do for Bharat what IT did for India. What a master communicator he was when it came to selling a good idea. You want to see what a farm revolution looks like? In the decade between 2002-3 and 2013-14, the cotton output in India rose from 13.6 million bales to 39.8 million bales, a neat 193% rise. The per hectare yield nearly doubled from 302 kilograms to 566 kilograms per hectare, that is. These figures are from Indian Council of Research on International Economic Relations, ICRIER. From being a perennial cotton importer, India became a sizable exporter, topping $4 billion in 2011-12. It was the second largest grower after China and a significant exporter then onwards. The biggest beneficiary was the farmer from Gujarat, enjoying an 8% growth over that decade, 8% per year. Today, India is back to importing, including about $500 million worth from America. Our yields have fallen back from 566 to 436 per hectare. Compare it with China's 1945, that's no typo, 1945. That's more than 4 times India's yield. And Brazil's 1839. The global average is 770 kg. That includes Pakistan, that includes all of Africa, and so on. That is how badly we have collapsed. Our cotton yield now is below the global average, way below the global average, almost 2/3 of the global average. How did we go so wrong? It is tragic how localized seed lobbies and cartels joined hands with activists on both sides, left and right, although more on the right, to block the entry of newer generations of BT seeds, now called HTBT. HT also is herbicide tolerant. In the name of seed sovereignty, these cartels began producing their own BT seeds, and we all know science doesn't work like that. You copy science like that, it doesn't work like that. They drove out the MNCs and their research, called them evil. They said this was a question of India's seed sovereignty. They drove them out. The result is our cotton disaster. We use cotton as a metaphor or example of what could have been and what can still be. India needs soybean and corn, the two crops that the US wants to export to us. We only don't want to buy because all of these crops in the US are GM. Why should we be short of these in the first place? The biggest reason is the fear of science. Modi now has the power numbers, and the political capital to shed this fear. India's yields for soybean and corn are a fraction of the norm compared to the big growers, including China. Today, we are food grain surplus, but import edible oils and pulses worth almost $24 billion every year. $24 billion. Add to this about $10 billion every year in fertilizer imports, where we depend on countries not particularly friendly to us, Turkey and China, for example. The phobia of GM seeds today is the same as that for the hybrids in 1960s. Modi has to risk braving it, as did Mrs. Gandhi in 1966. Today, more than 78 countries are growing GM seeds. The reason I say more than is that almost every couple of weeks a country gets added, and this is across about 220 million hectares. That's more than all of the arable area of India. This area is now increasing dramatically as China has accepted these GM seeds about 4 years back, and they are increasing that area. How far India has slipped on agriculture in the past decades is evident in the India-China comparisons. We have more than 200 million hectares of arable land and produce 332 million tons of food grains. China has 156 million hectares and grows 706 million tons. That is more than twice as much. We need to learn from our neighbors, even if they are adversaries. Both China and Pakistan have moved their farm support to direct benefit transfers, so no subsidized fertilizers, no free electricity, no MSP. We are at a stage where almost 75% of our central agricultural budget goes to subsidies. The nearly 1.7 trillion rupee fertilizer subsidy is in addition to that. And yet, there is a persistent and crippling shortage every growing season. Shortage of fertilizers, there is black market, overuse and smuggling of urea, dependence on so many foreign suppliers, including, as I just mentioned, Turkey and China. The application of this subsidy is so flawed, so cockeyed, it goes straight to the manufacturer, so-called manufacturer, who often only imports in bulk, repackages and sells at a predetermined price, at a government-determined price, after pocketing the subsidy from the government, of course. Free electricity has so distorted our power economics that all our state utilities go through serial bankruptcies. Telangana Chief Minister Revanth Reddy told us in Hyderabad last week that he has created a distribution company exclusively for giving away this free power. He funds it from his budget. This way, he says, at least my other distribution companies or power utilities have a healthy balance sheet. They can secure better ratings and borrow at rates way lower than the current 11 to 12%. It is these areas Modi can reform in this warlike situation that Trump has imposed on India. This trade war is a test of sovereignty and Atmanirbharta. Reforming agriculture is the toughest thing, as Modi learned from those withdrawn farm bills, which was a national tragedy. We fully supported those bills. We thought they were just what India's agriculture needed. Because of many things that had unintended consequences, those bills were withdrawn. It's a national tragedy. Farming contributes about 16% of the GDP, just about 16% of the GDP, but more than 50% of our voters are linked to it. So about 50% of your voters are linked to 16% of the GDP. That's why agriculture punches politically more than 3 times above its weight compared to its contribution to the GDP. That's why also any major changes with agriculture entail political risk. Leaders avoid it because the risk is personal and can lose them power. That's what Modi has to weigh to do the best by his country and its farmer. The Trump tariff crisis is India's opportunity for a new green revolution.